All right, hey guys, I wanted to make a quick asynchronous lesson for you guys as you are getting into Common Lit again from break. And if you are new, I want to show you guys how to add a Common Lit to your course in ClassLink. Okay, so even if you were my student last semester, you still need to click through and add a new Common Lit. Or add yourself to a new Common Lit class, okay? Because all of the classes kind of shifted around for the most part. Everyone's in the same class, but there's actually several students that kind of got wiggled around a little bit. Like for example, I used to have a third block, and now I don't. Now I have no third block. Okay, so I have third block planning, whereas I didn't have a fifth block, and now I have a fifth block students. Okay. So what I want to show you guys is your task 3, which is where you found this video. This is what you are working on asynchronously today. Okay, so this is what you guys will see in your Schoology. So it says, today we will be exploring more about Shakespeare's writing in our everyday life while also practicing our informational reading skills, which is the big objective that we are working on this year. Okay, so the video lesson will be that I'm recording right now will be right here. What you need to do first is you need to add yourself into the common link using your Wilson K Google. So for the most part, if you guys are in Schoology, you're automatically signed into your Google account. So all you have to do is you have to copy this and then open it in a new tab. It'll pop up and you'll enter in this class code. Okay. So when you've done that, after you found your block, so if you're in first block, you will enter this code. If you're in fifth block, you will enter this code. Okay. And then so forth for the other ones. Next, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be reading an article, which I'm going to go over with you in a second, and you will need to answer all of these questions that we're going to talk about in Common Lit. Okay, so even though we're going to be talking about them here in this video, you still need to complete this as your assignment submission in Common Lit. Okay, so I have also provided a link to those assignments. So right after sorry, that's the Spanish teacher down the hall. Right after you have enrolled in this class, you can just click on this and it'll automatically take you to that class and to the assignment. Or you can just go to the assignment tabs in Common Lit itself, okay? So once you click on that, what's going to pop up is our text for today, which is teaching Shakespeare in a maximum security prison. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this with you guys, kind of talk about some notes, and then we will get started. Okay, sounds good. All right, so what I want to show you guys is different ways that you need to think about informational text. Okay, so an important thing about informational text is it's not just an article all the time. Okay, sometimes you will have informational text that come to you in the form of a newscast, or you may have an autobiography, or you may have a speech that a president did, or you'll have an interview like what we are reading today. Okay, so when you come in Common Lit, I do want you to annotate. Okay, and so what annotating means is it basically just means to take notes. So it's just you taking notes on different things that you are finding in the text. So typically what I'll have is down here you can see what I want you to focus on in those annotations. Okay, so if you look at this, it says, let me get my little pointer. Maybe it's not working. Oh, no. Okay, never mind. So it says, in the National Public Radio interview hosted by Michelle Martin, Professor Laura Bates discusses teaching Shakespeare in a maximum security prison and discovering new insights into Shakespeare's writing. So this is your task before you answer any questions. Okay, as you read, take notes on what motivated Bates' decision and how reading Shakespeare affected the people in her class. So this is what I want you to be looking for as you are reading. Okay, now when you're looking at this, yours is going to look a little bit differently, obviously, because you have a student version. But just kind of scrolling down before we read, yours will have these little tabs right here. Okay, it's really important that when you are looking at Common Lit, that you are looking at these tabs because these tabs are kind of like footnotes, and footnotes are extremely important. You always want to read the footnotes, and it's vital when we actually start reading Shakespeare that you look at the footnotes for definitions, okay? Because sometimes you may think, oh, I know what that word means, but it's being used in a different context, okay? So always make sure that you're looking at the footnotes and you click on those. You'll also have guided reading questions just like this. Okay, that's basic, just comprehension. And then if you scroll all the way down, you will see more of the footnotes, okay? Which is basically just what you'll see here. So it kind of just depends on how you want to look at those footnotes, okay? But notes are extremely, extremely important when we're, especially now that we're getting ready to start Shakespeare, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through this together, and then I'll let you guys complete it on your own, okay? So it says, many people thought Laura Bates was out of her mind when she offered to teach Shakespeare in a maximum security wing of an Indiana prison. But the prisoners found a deep connection with the playwright's words. Laura Bates talks about her experience in the new book, Shakespeare Saved My Life, 10 Years in Solitary with the Bard. All right, and we know, we click on the footnotes, and Bard just is a nickname for Shakespeare, and it refers to a poet or a storyteller. She speaks with the host, Michelle Martin. Okay, so that's our first paragraph. Now, remember when we were talking about taking annotations? I'm going to show you how to do that. So again, what's bolded up here is going to be what I want you to look at when you're annotating, or this is what you will be answering as you annotate. So the question is, what motivates Bates' decision and how reading Shakespeare affected the people in her class? So in paragraph 1, we've already found one of those answers, okay? So it says the prisoners found a deep connection to the playwright's words. So that answers this question that about how reading Shakespeare affects the people in her class. Okay, so all you will do, again, you will highlight, click annotate. All right, click this little highlight button right here, and then tell me what you think or how that answers the question. Okay, so for example, this shows that Shakespeare was able to reach every type of reader based on his themes. Okay, so what I want you to do, every other paragraph, I would say, you need to have some type of annotations. For an article overall, you need to have at least 3 annotations. Okay, so you'll see this article, I mean, has what? That's a lot of paragraphs. You only have to annotate 3 times. Okay, you can annotate all in the beginning and then just read, or you can kind of annotate as you go. It's kind of up to you with whatever you want to do, but just know that you do need, this is part of your grade to annotate. Also, you can add extra annotations if you just find something that's interesting. Okay, so for example, if you're reading down here, let's see. Why was Larry in prison? All right, you want to annotate that. My guess is, and then tell me what you think. All right, you can do that too. However, those 3 main annotations have to be based on what I asked you to be looking for. Okay, so that is how you do an annotation. So let's now look at the interview, kind of go over some of these guided reading questions, and then you guys will complete this on your own in Common Lit. Okay. All right, so our host is Michelle Martin. So it says, I'm Michelle Martin, and this is Tell Me More from NPR News. We want to talk about Shakespeare now. So quick, what does that bring to mind? Maybe you think about struggling to get through sophomore English. Maybe you think about well-trained actors performing in beautifully appointed theaters. But what probably comes to mind are what does not probably come to mind are convicted murderers in some sort of restrictive circumstances in the country. But that's all actually where Laura Bates chose to teach, where she volunteered to teach English in Indiana's Wabash? Never heard of that place. I'm gonna say Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, and not just there, but in a super max facility where some of the most notorious prisoners were held. So again, we see that we have a little footnote, so we need to look at what that says. So notorious just means famous or well known. Okay. How can she come to teach Shakespeare there, and what she learned from herself? That experience is the subject of her new book, Shakespeare Saved My Life: 10 Years in Solitary in solitary with the bard, and Laura Bates is with us now. Welcome so much for joining us. Okay, so what I want to highlight, because I kind of want to show you guys how to annotate multiple times. I want to look at this one. So it says, what, or we want to talk about Shakespeare now. So quick, what does it come to mind? So for me, let's see if I can highlight that again. Okay, so for me, what comes to my mind is actually my freshman English class watching Romeo and Juliet with the dude that looks like Zac Efron. So we're actually going to be watching the same film that I watched when I was a freshman. It's actually really, really good now that I've studied the text and I've gone to college and I've studied Shakespeare. It's actually a really good adaptation. But when I was in high school, I just looked at it. I was like, oh, that's so cool. He looks like Zac Efron, even though it's in the 60s. So that's what comes to my mind. Okay, so that's another type of annotation that you can be doing. Remember, you have to have at least 3. Thank you for having me, Michelle. I think we should just answer the question that most people are going to have, which is, what gave you the idea to teach Shakespeare, not just to people who are in prison, but people who are considered the worst of the worst, the people who are in the most restrictive circumstances? So Bates says, exactly. Right. Now, it's important that when you're looking at this, again, we're talking about informational text and reading different types of informational text. So when you're looking at a text like this, you never want to go into it as just reading an article, right? And just kind of zooming through really quickly looking for information. This is a conversation. These are 2 people sitting down just talking about a specific subject, okay? So it's really important that when you're looking at an informational text that is an interview, you kind of go with it in that with it in mind that it is that conversation. The same thing that we would do if it's a speech. A speech is something that is spoke to a large audience. Okay, so you have to go at it knowing that this was performed and kind of spoke and presented to a large group of people. So this interview, just remember, it is a conversation, which it really will kind of help you understand it a little bit better. Okay. So we're right here. So it says, let me make it a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. All right, so Bates, who's the professor, says exactly. And that is the phrase that is most often used, the worst of the worst. Here in the state of Indiana, we have a few supermax units, and they do house what are considered to be the most violent offenders throughout the state of Indiana. And I didn't even know there was such a unit. It was a shock and a learning experience to me when I discovered this unit even existed. And briefly, what happened when I was teaching freshman English classes at the facility, Wabash, there's that word again, Valley, for prisoners in the general population. I was a part-time professor at the time at Indiana State University. In those days, we had a college degree granting program for prisoners, and one of my students got in trouble, and he was taken out of the class, and I started to ask around. Where's Don? What happened to him? Where did he go? And my prisoner students told me about this unit, this highly restrictive unit, Supermax. That's where my student Don had been sent. So I was told, okay, so what I want to do is I want to annotate this right here. So I was told at that time, well, there's no education in this unit. No teacher has ever gone into this unit. So I want to annotate this. And this is just my own personal thought. Why would she want to go here? It's very scary to teach prisoners, right? Especially not just normal prisoners. This is a highly restrictive, dangerous, aggressive prisoners, okay, are in this unit. So that's a very scary place. And then she says, so of course that made me want to go into that unit. I guess she wanted to be unique. I asked for permission from the administration and the warden. Again, here's the footnote. So we click on it. The warden is the head official charge in the prison. So it's kind of like the overall, it's like the principal of school. The warden is the jail. Okay. At the time, knew me and knew me to be, a good college professor for many years. He literally opened that door for me and ended up inviting me to begin a voluntary program based on Shakespeare, which is my specialty, for these inmates that not only were the worst of the worst, at least in the eyes of the public, but more importantly, in my own eyes, they were the ones that needed education the most. All right, very, very powerful statement. I'm just going to highlight that. I'm going to highlight it pink because I'm not going to add a note, but I just think that that's a very impactful statement, okay? They had the greatest need for education and for really any kind of programming. And ironically, they had the least available to them, which that is terrible, right? They needed the education the most and they had the least access. So these are the prisoners who over and over and over have been told that they are not capable, that they are certainly not intelligent, and that they are not able to take on these kinds of, intellectual challenges. And so here comes somebody from the street knocking on their cell door saying, "Hi, would you like to read some Shakespeare?" So initially that gets their attention. Right? Who are you? What do you want? There's a lot of, and that confused a lot of them. And really, what happened was a wonderful word of mouth within the prison setting itself. I kept telling my husband, if I could only get one, I just want one prisoner, who's willing to take this on. And if I can, demonstrate to both the prisoner population and the administration itself that this is successful, then it's going to grow. And my goodness, it grew. It grew to where we had 50 people on the waiting list at one point. That is insane. That's so cool. So, oh, we missed one of our questions. Let's go back up. Let's go to question 1. Okay, so question 1, let me move up here. So question 1, it said Laura Bates is interviewed for her what? Innovative teaching style, experience teaching Shakespeare in the prison, controversial understanding of Shakespeare's plays, or decision to study Shakespeare as a prisoner. What do you guys think? I don't know. Okay, so let's go back to question 2. Okay, so question 2 says, why does Bates decide to teach in a maximum security prison? She thinks that prisoners are not intelligent and need an education. She believes that they will learn a lot from teaching, that she will learn a lot from teaching in prison. She thinks that education is the only way to prevent prisoners from committing, I'm assuming that's a crime, I can't see it, or she realized that those need education the most. What do you guys think? Okay, so let's keep going. All right, so we see, well, what got me is the people. I thought it was hilarious is that, I thought it was funny because it didn't happen to me, but you described how people like literally slam doors in your face. You kind of have this idea that, people would be hungry for something to do. And when you raise this, you literally went knocking on steel doors. So I do kind of want to point out this language that we see here in this interview. It's important to remember that, like we said, this is a conversation. So they're not necessarily using the common conventions that we would see in a normal informational text, for example, in a scientific journal, things like that. They're going to have very clear grammar, very clear sentence structure. But this isn't this isn't that type of informational text. This is a conversation between two people. So you have to again look at this sentence structure where it's kind of sporadic, but you have to remember that it's just two people talking. Okay, so we don't speak in perfectly written conventions either, and so you can't expect an interview to be have perfect grammar, if I will say. Okay, so Bates says, yeah. Martin says, asking if anybody wanted to read, and there are a couple of people literally slammed the door in your face, but a few people did give it a shot and you started Macbeth. All right, so again, here's our footnote. So Macbeth is a Shakespearean tragedy about a Scottish general Macbeth whose ambition to be king eventually leads to his downfall. Y'all, Macbeth is wild. It is crazy. It's really not Macbeth that's the villain, it's his wife. She's like, oh, you want to kill somebody? Cool, let's do it. And just starts killing people. It's insane. All right, what do you think about this play? And from almost instantly, that people who did agree to study the work immediately got it and had some wonderful or some really powerful insights. And you were saying, gosh, some of their insights were beyond those of students who you'd been teaching for years. What is that about the play that you just grabbed people right off the bat? Okay, so this is really I like this statement a lot. I want to highlight this. Okay. So it says some of their insights were beyond those of students who you'd been teaching for years. So prisoners had great insight into what Shakespeare was saying. Oh, I can't talk today. Which shows how relatable it truly can be. Okay, so you have these students who are in university and through college and all of these things, and they get to a text and you would assume that they're the most intelligent, right? But then you have prisoners who lack a formal education, but they're looking at this text and they're finding all these profound things in it. So that just shows you how approachable Shakespeare really is. A lot of people give Shakespeare a bad rap and they're like, oh, I don't understand what it's saying. But if you just take some time and really pulling those onion layers back, it can really you can amaze yourself at how much you could actually get out of Shakespeare. So Bates says, and I have to say that some of their insights were beyond those of world-renowned professors I've studied with, from whom I've learned a great deal. But these prisoners were able to make sense of some passages that professional Shakespeare scholars struggled with for 400 years. I just want to highlight that because I think that is amazing. I think that's so cool. Well, the play Macbeth, I chose it partly because it does have to do with the subject matter that prisoners have, I felt would relate to. It's a story of a good man. Macbeth is a good man, a good, honorable general at the beginning of the story, but he's tempted by a number of outside influences. We might call them peer pressure. All right, there are these weird women he encounters, the witches, that kind of fill his head with some of these ideas, and then that's reinforced by his nagging wife. All of this kind of urging him to kill the king in order to become king himself. But throughout the play, what's wonderful about this play is that there are so many moments where Macbeth himself recognizes that this is wrong. I might be tempted. I might have ambitions, but to kill a man is not the right way to go. And so what happened was the prisoners, on one hand, caught up with the story. All right, it's an action-packed drama, but ultimately they found themselves relating not only to the character's actions, but to that inner struggle. And as they analyzed Macbeth's motives, when they were giving in to do something that he knows he doesn't want to do, it made him question his own motive. All right, so that answers one of our questions, right? So one of our questions, remember, that we're answering is how reading the Shakespeare affected the people in her class, okay? So right here, this is how it affects them, right? So it really shows us kind of how much that they can relate to these characters. Prisoners felt direct relation to the themes in the story. Okay. I mean, just like them, they're a good guy. They have all these outside influences, and that affects them. All right, so let's go to question 3. Question 3, let me kind of make it a little bit smaller. Okay, Bates believes that the prisoners enjoyed Macbeth because why? They loved all the intense violence that takes place. They connected with Macbeth's inner struggles. They enjoyed Shakespeare's wordplay in the text, and they admired Macbeth for doing what was necessary to satisfy his ambition. Killing. All right, what do you guys think? Did you think B? Good job. Okay, so let's zoom back in. Here we are. All right, Martin says, if you're just joining us, I'm speaking with English professor Laura Bates. We're talking about her new book, Shakespeare Saved My Life, 10 Years in Solidarity with the Bard. You focus a lot of the book on, I think these little titles come from here too, is your friendship with one of the prisoners. Again, we're using this kind of loaded language, but notorious prisoner, somebody named Larry Newton. And you weren't sure if even you could reach him when you first met. But he turned out to be a remarkable student. He impressed you as soon as he started talking about Richard II. Again, we're going to look at these footnotes, which King Richard II is one of Shakespeare's historical plays based on the life of King Richard II. Okay, so Shakespeare wrote kind of in really four, but 3 main categories. He had his his histories, then he had his tragedies and comedies. You also technically have his romances, and they're kind of pastoral romances, but that's kind of, you learn that way later, okay? If you're an English major. He eventually wrote a number of workbooks, yes, that that you then used in the program and that other people can use in other programs too. Could you talk a little bit more about him? Absolutely. In fact, one of the results of publishing this book, I hope, will be that we can get some of these other materials, like the workbooks that Larry and I created together. I hope we get those out in a wider audience because I am using them not only in other prisons that I'm working with throughout the state of Indiana, and I'm working now with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I'm using the workbooks even with my college students on campus and with area high school students. So it has a wide range of appeal. What Larry's basic approach was exactly that idea, that getting insight into Shakespeare's characters, providing insight into your own characters. And so he and I together created full-length workbooks of 13 of Shakespeare's plays, that's crazy. And in each of those workbooks, there is a day by day what he calls considerations, a point to consider in the play that involves examining the motives of the character and always bringing it right back to your own motives and your own choices. Again, I just want to highlight this because that still shows, like I said, how Shakespeare can be so relatable. Okay. And one of the most remarkable projects actually dealt with the play of Romeo and Juliet. Yay! All right, in this introduction, you mentioned struggling through sophomore English class, and most of your listeners, I'm sure, can remember a similar experience. And too often in high school, the approach that is taken with a play like Romeo and Juliet is short of what I call the lovey-dovey stuff, the love story, the idealized, suicide of teenage lovers, which is not necessarily how we will be doing, because this play is insane, guys. Not just a love story. It's a twist. Okay. So she says, but through my work with prisoners, I really found that a part of it is so often overlooked is the violent society in which a teenager like Romeo ends up becoming an actual serial killer. Nobody talks about that. They read Romeo and Juliet, they're like, oh, Romeo and Juliet, they were so love. Dude, Romeo just starts slaying people. It gets crazy. It's insane. So we talk a lot about instability, I guess, emotional instability. So he says he kills more than once throughout the play, and he's a good kid. He's a good young man, and yet, by looking at the kind of society that he grows up in, I think could really be a powerful opportunity for high school teachers across the country to use the play like Romeo and Juliet to discuss the extremely important issue of teenage violence, which we will for sure. Okay, so question 4 is Bates and a prisoner created workbooks that what students dislike because they're so difficult. Talks about how Shakespeare can be taught in prisons, helps students from committing crimes, or encourage students to compare their motives to the characters in their lives. What do you think? Did you think D? Because you may be right. Okay, so this is where I'm going to leave you. I want you guys to log into Common Lit if you have not already and finish reading this article by yourself. Remember, you technically have to have 3 annotations, but feel free to kind of annotate like I showed you, not just answering the annotation questions, but kind of just show me your thoughts and insight and anything you want to share with me about this text. Now, you will have to finish questions 4 through 6, as well as the assessment questions, all right, which is basically just looking at the text. Okay, and then you will also write the discussion questions as well. Okay, so I hope this is helpful. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.